if you're listening to the wrong voices, you may think that you are not doing the right thing. And I'm like, maybe I am wrong, but then I stopped and I'm really sorry, but you're not that successful. You're a slave to your system. You have nowhere to go with where you're working.
Okay. Well, as Scott waits for his nootropics to kick in, we'll
get started.
We'll get going. All right, man. Let's just kick off. I don't want to do any preamble or whatever, but last time that you and I were together, I guess this will probably come out a month in advance. I was talking about this idea of judgment and people and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And looking back, I was in a bad place. I was really negative, and I realized in my follow-up thinking about this, which FYI, if you guys don't like how you act, then, think about it sometimes. I realized that this was actually hugely selfish and betraying some immaturity on my end. And so I just wanted to give a wrap up for anyone who is listening to that, wondering about the answer to that. And I realized, much like you told me, which is I can only control me, but who am I in light of God, number one, which is where I have to just keep putting things his pedestal is infinite. Mine, itty bitty. And if I'm on a pedestal in front of God, wow, what a horrible place to be. What a arrogant, selfish place to be, thinking that I could be anywhere closer to him than any other human being. So I just realized that I'm going to drop it. I am praying and working on this constantly. This is my one thing for the rest of the month is please turn my heart from selfishness and pride to loving other people. And that is difficult and that is hard for me. But I just wanted to follow up and realize that, man, it was all me. It was just all me. When I see people who aren't performing as high level, it doesn't actually matter for who I am, because I think I was taking a bit of a savior complex. I was like, look, I'm a coach, guys pay me for this, and I'm held to a standard for results, but I was just putting that on everybody in the world. And I'm not a savior. I don't know everything. I cannot be everything to everybody. And so I realized, much thanks to what you said to me, you can only control you, and then raise the rent in your head, you told me. I was like, oh yeah, what if I just be nice to people? What does that look like? Because I don't really know, because I'm actually a little bit scared of being seen by other people. And this is what I realized the other day. There's a homeless person. This is the last thing I'll say here. There's a homeless person. And I was like, oh man, I know the right thing to do here is just ask him what he wants to eat and order something from the drive-thru and just get it for him. And I'm going to be brutally honest here. The fear of judgment of someone behind me going oh, look at this guy, giving something for free, enabling this person was probably the thing that stopped me. I wasn't sure if I was enabling, I didn't know the story of this person, but I could have just pulled over and talked to him. Hey man, why are you out here? What's going on? And I noticed in that moment, it was usually a fear of being judged. And so in all of this, I'm thinking that, man, people are looking at me, and I'm realizing that when I'm judging other people going why don't you be better at this? We talked about in our last podcast, that's betraying the fact that I'm comparing them to me. And that is selfishness 101. I'm in that all the time because I'm always looking at me. So I just wanted to publicly repent and be seen as the other side of this equation, that when I'm looking at other people not performing very well, I'm only comparing them to me, and that's totally wrong. So that's all I need to say on that. I just need to...
I agree with that loop closure, but I have a very unique perspective because I get to see a little further into Curt's world. So I get to peel the layers back a little bit. And what was it that really got you to that point where, in retrospect, you were obviously kind of being introspective and thinking about the process and the things. How long did that take you? I want people to understand, how long did this process to take you? What was the process like? Was it immediate? Oh my gosh. Or was there a lot of prayer and meditation around this?
Well, this one, it's been maybe 2 weeks since we recorded last time. This will come out later than that, but it was pretty immediate that I knew something was wrong. And because it kept coloring my conversations, my wife and I, we would notice that, man, our conversations are pretty negative. Did you see this happen? Can you believe that this happened? What are we going to do about this? And I just called us on it. And I was like, man, we have to stop doing this. And that's when I brought it up here. That's when I brought it up to you. And it just wasn't sitting right. And so, yeah, I tackled it as my number one thing because it was keeping me from who I said I was going to be, which was number one, an ambassador to Christ, and just a kind person with friends who people want to be around. How am I going to have influence if I'm an asshole?
Well, newsflash, everybody's an asshole at some point. And we all see things we all see things from our own perspective. And I've been really dealing with this a lot. One thing that I've been really intentional about with my wife and I is we used to talk about things and what people were doing wrong a lot. And we have a very, very close relationship. I think you guys do too. And I know you do. And it was just became this natural thing. And I realized later there's no solution happening in these conversations. And I decided at one point I have to lead. And so I made this habit, and it took me a long time, and I'm still working on it. But when I get into a conversation about like somebody it's negative, maybe it's not positive, or I've seen where they're kind of going wrong, I will stop and say, I wonder what we could do to help in this situation, instead of like, oh my gosh, they're doing this, this, and this. And then sometimes I'll be as bold and say, hey, we're not getting anywhere. We're not doing any good by talking about this at this point. Unless we have solutions, we probably should shut up. And she'll look at me and she'll, well, yeah. So, but it's taken a long time. Yeah. I mean, I'm a lot older than you, so I've had a lot more practice doing it wrong and right. But I think you have to learn to give yourself grace, right? Like, do you feel like, do you realize that other people do this, Curt?
You know what? This is one of the things that I feel like I've got an unintentional blind spot on. The level that I judge myself is so much higher. Like last episode, we just talked about how much I judge other people, right? Like even though I said, oh, it wasn't judgment, I asked my granddad about this real quick. And he's like, well, you've got these two things. You've got you saying you're not trying to judge, and then you've got you judging. So what is the connection here? You need to stop judging. And I was like, man, well, when you say it like that, I guess that's the thing. But I hold myself to such a ridiculously high standard, which I think is a superpower, and with all superpowers has a massive ditch I can fall into. And that is thinking that I am very unique, even in my failures. And men's group and coaching and Brotherhood have done a lot to negate that, but it's still something I've got to deal with, going, well, like other people they're better at this, they're nicer at this, and they're more easily, getting along with people. And I see other people having friends. Therefore, I'm just over here judging, man. And like, I don't know, maybe everyone else is just super nice.
Yeah, dude, I can't say I haven't been there. I'm the guy that goes into a room. I am not this guy. I used to be this guy that would go into a room and just think, holy crap, everyone's got so much more together than me. They're more successful. They have more friends. Look at the conversations they're having. And I put a self-limiting ability on myself. I put this limit where I couldn't step into who I really should be until I realized, holy cow, this is all me. This is nobody else. And that's just it's a really hard place to be. So how are you going to avoid it next time? I mean, like, what are you going to do?
Well, okay. Let me just make a note of that. How to avoid next time. But I want to talk about the, what you just said there, which is like, I think we are very similar in this. There's this thing that I think we both have, which is like, we are objectively good at a lot of things, and we are way too, I'm not going to say humble, because I don't think that's quite it. Like, we just don't give ourselves credit where the credit is due. And so on the one hand, we're like, okay, we can really do this. We're super confident when we're doing it alone. But then we get around other people and we're like, well, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to be too pushy. These people probably have it together. And it's this really brutal mix of both like really high ability and confidence in self. And then it's almost like as soon as you get around other people, you're like, well, I don't know though. Like maybe they are right. Maybe there's this weird thing. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a really deep thing.
Yeah. And it took a lot of work to get into a room and not feel that way. So I am really making huge strides in that. So I'm in, several masterminds, and I have made it a point before I step in a room is to actually go through kind of a mental checklist. And like, I have a lot to offer. And if you were to peel back the layers of each of these guys and gals in this room with their business, there's a really good chance that I am at the success rate of the upper like 2% or 5%, right? And I'm not trying to be cocky or weird, but the truth is a lot of people struggle and put on a facade, and then we're just judging everything on ourselves against their facade.
That's right. That's exactly it. Because I would never think about lying. And I'm not saying like, oh, I'm this little angel over here. But like, my default is not, well, I better just make myself look better here. It definitely used to be when I needed to be perfect, when I needed everyone to look perfect. But authenticity and integrity is way more important to me. And so I'm judging myself from like the lowliest point of like, maybe even false humility. but I'm seeing other people doing the opposite, which is trying to make things look better. And so there's like a double chasm there where I'm trying to make myself low and they're trying to make themselves a little bit high. And I'm not saying either side is right or wrong or malicious, but it's like I end up feeling like everyone's crushing it all the time. And I'm just back here like floundering. Yeah. So it seems like we might share that. And I wonder if a lot of other guys have that as well.
I think people who have visions of high performance are definitely going to be operating that way. There's a, when I get into conversations with people in business sector and owning business owners is who I hang around with. When I get into the conversations with them and you get deep, you realize that everybody is really struggling with the same thing, but they're just different approaches, just as you mentioned. So you have people who are like, oh, I'm going to puff my chest up, talk about like my income is 10x what it is. I'm going to drive a really crazy car and really rare shoes so that everybody thinks I'm crushing it. But on the inside, you get into those conversations, you're like, oh, this guy's life is complete trash. Him and his wife have a horrible relationship. And I actually had thought a lot about this in the last 6 months is there's these blessings. We're told that we can be blessed. And we so often focus on just ourselves instead of realizing really how blessed we are. And so a lot of it's fake out there, and we're battling these fakes because I literally have no interest in being fake. In fact, even me saying like I might be at the upper 2%, I'm going to give everybody an insight to my brain. Saying that made me immediately feel regret because I don't know that. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh, I just said something that might not be true. And I would lose sleep over that. And so that's the level that's the level I operate. It's crazy. I'm my own worst enemy at sometimes, but it's taken a lot of work. So if I can talk to anybody younger and convince them that like, look, you've got to believe in who you are and what you're doing at that moment. And you've got to believe in the way that you operate is awesome. But also have a very good mirror. So you also stay humble. It's a tightrope walk.
Yes. Exactly. You're balancing yourself with like a pail on either end of a stick doing a tightrope walk. One side is that humility. The other side is like actually reality where you are doing a good job. But what you said about, I have to remind myself that I am actually doing a good job. I saw something from some coach I'd been following at some point, and I don't know, it was in my notes somewhere. And I wrote it down in my weekly tracker this week that says, don't you know how valuable you are? Insert yourself in stuff. People need what you have. And it's like, dude, that's so obvious. It's so obvious because like it's proven people are in their groups and people are following me on Instagram and people listen to this podcast. And yet I'm like, well, I don't know, dude, like, there's a lot of ways. It's just my way. And I'm not saying that I'm not confident about what I do, but I'm defaulting to this idea of, I don't want to bother you, man. But I've talked about this with you, I think before as well, where it's like, if I could save one person from going through the misery that I went through, which is I was literally thinking of killing myself because I was so bad to my family. Of course I've got something of value. If I can just stop like one guy, be like, bro, there's a little bit of hope. FYI, if you just like communicate, feel your feelings and, write some stuff down in a journal, that alone will do so much. And then what about communication, this and that and this and that? And it's like, oh man, you just have to remind yourself if you're in this weird continuum of you don't want to be cocky, you really don't want to be cocky, you almost lose your sense of purpose and value because you're trying to appear a certain way. And again, how selfish is that? Because I'm trying not to appear cocky to other people. Everything keeps coming back to that like identity externalized. Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot to that. You asked about how I was going to not do this next time. You know what? I hope we can talk later today about something that I would also like to not repeat because I am finding myself needing lessons over and over and over. And, man, I think for me, it's boiling down to writing it down in my journal every morning, setting my intention in the morning. That's part of my morning routine is like, who do I want to be today? Looking for it in scripture and praying for it. So those are like the 3 or 4 very tactical, specific things to keep it front of mind. And I know that if it's in the front of my mind, at least with the way my brain works, I'll just like chip away at it. Things will come into my reality and they'll like bump this idea and they'll shave the hardness off the sides. They'll shave the sharpness off the sides of it until it's able to settle down into a way that I hope is going to be a little bit less jarring next time it comes up.
Yeah, you just explained basically how you get good at anything. You put it in front of yourself, you work daily on it, you are intentional about it, and you have a plan, right? Like, so there's so much I want to share about right now.
Go for it. Let's
Because
go.
I found myself being very judgmental over the last week and a half. And it was nothing. It's not that there's this very fine line. We're supposed to be in rooms and surround ourselves with people who will lift us up or raise our level, people who are going or are at the place where we want to go. Right. So like, if I want to make, if I want to make net revenue of $1 million next year that goes into my bank account, I need to be hanging out with people that are already doing that, right? Because they know the road, they know the path. If I want to, be a better father, I need to be around really, really amazing fathers, all these things. But then there's this place where I found myself in rooms with people who were, and mostly this is in marriage and in their business, way lower. They're in much different levels. And I found myself being really judgmental. I'm like, okay, because what happened, Curt, this is really interesting. Here's a tip of advice for people on listening to this podcast. If you find somebody that has done something ahead of you, they have some wisdom, and you see them as somebody with wisdom or knowledge, and you ask them for advice, if you're going to ask other people for advice after that and not take it, put them out of the conversation. So I'd been asked advice by several people who, really need a ton of help in their business, and they're flailing and they're doing the same things wrong over and over again. And I gave them my advice, and then they brought this conversation up in a Slack channel. And I just told them, you guys are completely wasting my time. You asked me specifically, I gave you the roadmap. You're going to get there eventually. You just chose not to take it. And now you just wasted like 30 minutes going back and forth on this thing. And both of these people had talked to me separately about the same thing. And I just about lost my stuff. And someone from out in the group texted me privately, like, you okay, bro? I'm like, I'm tired. And I was having a conversation with the same guy later today. And this was last week, but I had a conversation with him today. And I'm like, I'm really tired of being in these rooms with people that just aren't ready to grow. And I think this is where what you and I see all the time. We see dads out there really screwing up. We see families out there not interacting right, because we've done a lot of work. And he said, Scott, you're like on the 15th floor. I'm like, okay. He's like, in your business, you can just keep riding that elevator up, but it gets pretty lonely. Or you can take that elevator down once in a while and bring a few people with you. Oh. So sometimes bringing people with you it's risky. They're not going to listen. They're going to do the opposite. Some people have to learn lessons on their own the hard way. And I just thought that was a really good analogy, because I really don't want to be on an elevator alone on a really high floor. So it was a little bit of an eye opener for me. There is a purpose in giving to others and putting away judgment and understanding that I used to be that person. How many people have I asked for advice and not taken it, even though they were crushing it? And then 3 years later, I'm like, well, I have this great idea. I'm going to do this. And it's what they told me 3 years ago, right? So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was a really sweet analogy of a way that I can start to understand that I can still elevate, but I can also come down for a little bit and talk people maybe to the next level.
Yeah, you know what? That's the exact same metaphor that I heard from a man, I think he's about 60 years old, that I met with for coffee about a month ago. And I was talking to him about very similar things. And the word that I used, I said, look, I used to believe, and this is how I used to think about it, and I probably still do, even though I'm trying not to, is that I'm alone at the top of a mountain. And he basically said, if you find yourself trekking in a mountain and you're alone, you're on the wrong mountain. It's like, oh man, that's so right. But the way that I've been thinking about this lately, because I think about this all the time, I don't know if this is useful for guys, but we're just going to go for it because there's levels, right? I want to be around guys who can push me. Like I need people above me, and that has been very challenging for me, either through pride or, like we were talking about before, maybe I am good at some stuff. And to find people beyond me who I ask for help is so hard, because I'm often in that role for other people. That's just the business that we run. It's just what happens. I'm naturally a leader. And so to find someone like you, for example, like what a blessing, because I can legitimately say, here's everything that I don't know what to do with. What would you do? And then I trust you because I've seen you and I get it. I know that you know the answer. So there's also then peers. Who am I going to talk to who can just like, hey, we're in it right now. We're really in this. And then, of course, there's the people who you're bringing up. And I think, at least for me as a man, what I'm trying to do now, what I'm trying to realize is I used to think, oh man, I want like 50 mentors. I want like 100 friends. I want thousands of men to bring up. And I think the reality is, and this is very important for me to get these mental reframes. I think the reality is if I can find 1 or 2 mentors, I am blessed beyond belief. If I can find 3 to 5 peers, I am blessed beyond belief. And then I just help as many people below me get to my level as possible. I didn't like the math of that at first because I was like, well, I'm going to be lonely. What about me? And it's like, dude, the burden of leadership is that you just keep leading. And I think that's something that I've really come to understand. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think that like guys who are in leadership positions, when I've brought them into the men's groups that we've run, they're like, oh yeah, but I don't want to lead here. I don't want to do this. I want somewhere in my life where I'm not leading. And they always come back to the fact that they just can't help themselves because that is their particular gift or talent. So I don't know. Is that a good way to think about it?
I think it's a really good way.
Like
I think it's a really good way to think about it. And I was also, I'm a big fan of learning that mentors don't actually have to be someone you talk to as well. Like you absolutely should have somebody that listens to you and calls you on your stuff and helps you see in a mirror a little better. But sometimes you can increase your mentors by reading books and blogs and everything somebody puts out. But this is another example of quality over quantity, right? Like if I can have 5 really great friends who are kind of emerging at the same level of business and kind of going through the same things, I'm in really good shape. If I can have a mentor or 2, then I'm in really good shape. It's when you don't have any of that is when you really have to get to work. And so, I've been in that place in my life where I don't have any of that. And then you're sitting there doing everything yourself wrong. Because there's no one calling you out on your BS. There's no one calling you out on your absolute blind. We are so blind. How many things are we blind to, Curt? I mean, it's ridiculous, right?
I always say we are our own worst enemies because we are our own best bullshitters.
Yeah.
Honestly, I will always BS myself to make myself more comfortable accidentally. And I've noticed that no matter how disciplined I am, that's my default for so many things. So when I need you and I need the other men who are in my life to be able to be like, bro, aren't you seeing what's right in front of you? I'm like, nope, yeah. I'm not. Thank you.
No, not at all. Yeah. I think we just need to have other people in our life. A lot of men make this mistake. They don't have the right men in their life. They don't have anybody elevating them at all. I'm not saying like shed yourself of all your friends from high school or college. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying get somebody who actually is going to elevate you. If you don't have that, you have to be incredibly intentional about it and you have to be very vulnerable about it. And I think you and I at least talked about this is like, there's a chance that you'll peek under the hood and they're not who they say they are. And then you have to understand that that's a circumstance, not the rule. Right? Like there are people who are good and who look to be what they say they are, but you have to use discretion and take time. And that's just, it's a long road. And I think we're going to touch on that today anyway, that good things take time. They really take time.
Yeah.
I mean, they really take time. So I've been reading Discipline is Destiny or whatever it is by Ryan Holiday. And I kept putting this book off and he's talking about all these things. But one thing he said is like a messy workspace leads to sloppy work product, something of that nature. I'm like, wow, that's good. That's so true. I don't know about you, but my gym is like set up for flow. Everything is where it belongs. And my desk will be set up for flow. Sometimes it gets a little crazy, but then I go and readjust it. Right. And so I posted it and people went off, Curt. It was crazy. It was so like, they're like, that's wrong. I totally disagree. And one gal's like, I can find research that says the opposite. And I said, please, by all means, here's what I said to her. I said, please link the research. But I also understand that you're not really one of those. What did I say? I happen to know that you have been fighting research lately. This is around vaccines. And so I was like, research can go both ways, but I kept having person after person like one guy who's in the military just said, he's like, that means you're not doing any work. I'm like, really? Wow. And it just comment after comment. But what happened in that circumstance is I see the way that people view the world. But here's the thing I came up with. If you're listening to the wrong voices, you may think that you are not doing the right thing. I could look at all those replies and think that, man, maybe I'm wasting my time organizing. Maybe one guy said only neat freaks and crazy people do that. I mean, it's just, over and over again. And I'm like, maybe I am wrong. But then I stopped. I looked at each person. And if one of you is listening, I'm really sorry, but you're not that successful. You really aren't. None of you. One of them's like, I'm super sloppy and I'm incredibly successful. I do this and this and this and this. And all I could think was, you're a slave to your system. You have nowhere to go with where you're working. So I don't know if I really call that success. Maybe you do, but I don't. And then, so like, I have so many things I want to say here is, one, when you've been doing the work for so long, you start to think that the world operates the same way and sees things the same way you do, and they do not. And then also when you feel like people are kicking against you, take a moment and look at, it's not judgment, but understand the place that they're coming from. Those people may not want to be more successful in their work. They might not want to be higher achieving. And I'm just telling them right now, unless they get their stuff together, they're not going to be. But, their perception of the world is, and someone wrote this, they're like, nobody can view this in their own perception. If they're messy, they're not going to notice that that's just messing with them. I mean, anyway, I'm all over the board, but I just thought it was really interesting that my perspective, I just figured everyone was going to agree with me that cleanliness and orderliness is more effective.
Yeah. This is
Am I wrong?
A lesson. Well, no. Well, objectively, you're right, obviously, because I'm looking around my neat, orderly office right now.
We're not.
Yeah, well, no. If everyone just did everything like me, the world would be a better place. But that's a very regular thing that my wife and I would butt heads about earlier on in our marriage, which was like, I was expecting something perfect so that when there were things around, even if there's a pile of papers, I will organize them and I'll make them neat and I'll put them on the edge of a desk. Oh man, like the relief I feel even thinking about that. And she's not like that. She's like, well, I'm doing stuff with this and I need to see it. And I've heard the quote about, what is it? A messy desk is indicative of a messy mind or something. But then other people are like, well, a clean desk an empty desk is indicative of an empty mind. So it's like, I understand that there are two different ways of looking at this. I personally fall on the neat and orderly and cleanly thing, but it is interesting to take that into this marriage conversation to be like, I had to realize that my wife sees things way differently than I do. And I've come to call it now like she's like a Mac, I'm like a PC. I mean, I'm not like a PC at all. I'm more like a Mac, but let's just use the analogy. There's a Mac and a PC and we can't talk to each other, right? If I try to install her software on my computer, it doesn't work. And what you have to do then is build a bridge or a port, like I don't even know computers, but imagine a port that can make a Mac and a PC talk to each other. I had to be like, oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that? And she's like, well, this, and this. And I'm like, oh man, I wouldn't even have guessed that. It would literally have been impossible. So my assumption was you were wrong because you must be kind of like not as smart as me. And her same thing. She's like, why are you cleaning up after me? Like, what is wrong with you? You can't let me be? You're so overbearing. And I was like, no, I literally feel overwhelmed when I see a mess. I am cleaning up. And you know what? I've got so much better at that because I finally realized this wasn't the only way to do things. I don't like it, but I love my wife and my family more than I like being clean and right. And so do I have a high standard? Of course. I expect my kids clean up their toys when they're done playing with them. At the end of the day, we clean up. But am I now cleaning up every mess behind everyone every second of the day so I can't even play with my kids because I'm too busy cleaning? Not anymore. And it doesn't cause a headache because I now understand it. And I know I get this honestly. Some member of my family is very much like this, sort of sweeping under his wife's feet while she's making stuff in the kitchen. So, there's different ways than yours to do things. And when it comes to marriage, I've just found it very important to speak the unsaid assumptions. What do you think a husband's role is? What do you think a wife's role is? what are your expectations for me? And those two questions have been like absolute game changers for us as we've come to realize that it's not that they're stupid. It's that they have a different operating system. So anyway,
it's really good. I mean, it's basically as basic as love languages. If you haven't taken the love language test, you should. That will tell you that your operating systems are completely different. You know, my wife took it just recently and she did a printout. And so I lost the last printout. So I took that printout and I put it on my bathroom counter, and it's really good because I'm like, oh yeah, she's a Mac, I'm a PC. You know, like, whoa, like complete polar opposite of me. But it's so funny. We were talking yesterday because you will over time come closer to each other, or you'll elevate to what is really the best, right? But we were laughing about the places where we started in our marriage and where we are now. It's pretty funny. She used to take VHS movies, and if you guys, any of you are old enough, you know, the VHS cassettes on, and we had just bookshelves of them. We loved watching movies, and she would take like one and just pull it at a different depth than the others. And then she would go to another spot and pull it at a different depth, because she'd noticed I was always like lining them perfectly. Right. And she started doing that, and she got the biggest kick out of it. She like almost every day I'm like, and I was just going and fixing them. And then I finally clued in what was going on. And she just she's over there rolling, laughing. She's like, I wonder how long it would take you to figure it out. But you know, if that's you, if you're continually pushing the VHS videos back in place, just understand that that's an indication that maybe your view of the world is your view of the world. And look, I'm not going to say there's different truths. We're not going there. There's absolute truth, but the way that we operate might be a little different. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's super interesting in that as well, because what I found was, again, man, there's ditches on all sides. And that's why I think like balance is the ultimate equilibrium, which I guess like, you know, that has to be true based on the words. But what I mean by that is I am right for me to be neat and tidy and have a clean workspace. I noticed my productivity going down when I had mess in here 2 weeks ago, so I cleaned. And now I'm feeling awesome. But what is in that for me? What is in cleanliness for me? Number one, it makes me feel good, so that's fine. But number two, the ditch that I fall into is, I need to control everything to be able to function. Why? Well, because if I feel out of control, I might do something wrong and someone might blame me for it. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm scared of not being perfect because, you know, this is my pattern growing up. And so if you really dig in, if you haven't done the work to rub the edges off of these things, these idiosyncrasies that you've got, yeah, it's right for me to be cleanly for sure, but it wasn't right for me to be cleanly for reasons of scarcity and fear. It is okay now because I've got past that and I'm no longer like hurt by it. But it used to be, this is why I was such a bad father and husband when we first had kids, because I was out of control. I couldn't control a 1-year-old screaming. I couldn't control a 1-year-old coming into my office. I couldn't control the fact that I needed to stop working and go deal with them because I was a father and a husband now. And that lack of control absolutely shattered me, and it caused me to be angry and irritable and miserable and mean, because lack of control for me put me in a position of potential pain. Because if I couldn't control everything around me, there was a chance that someone was going to get me in quote unquote trouble. That was my pattern growing up. So I just want to like call out the deeper thing here, which is, are you doing the right thing for the right reason, or are you operating from an old limiting belief? Does that make sense?
I think a lot of people operate from old limiting beliefs. And if you don't think you are, get a mentor or a coach, you'll find them out really fast.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, someone who will actually call you out. And like you say, like, do I have permission to say this? I'm like, please. You know what? Why don't we move on to this like millennial thing that I saw? I want to get into this because, okay, I almost shot a reel about this, but I was like, I don't know, I was too cranky about it. Because here's the thing: does this actually matter? Maybe not. But for me, the issue here, and let me just set this up. It's not about what they're saying. It's not about the fact that, like, you know, I'm just a grump. It's about the fact that I think we're setting a very low bar for fatherhood. And for me, that's not acceptable because the statistics are so clear. Fathers in a home have outsized returns on family, on children, on everything. Like, it's not negotiable. And therefore, for me at least, average is unacceptable. I've got to be the best husband and father I can be, and I've got to put everything that I can into being that. So here's what I see on Instagram. 2 different accounts, like in the recommended pile, whatever. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time on Instagram other than just posting on there, but I'm scrolling and I see this like news thing on this Instagram account, and it said millennial dads are spending 3 times as much time with their kids than their fathers spent with them. First of all, you're like, okay, sweet. And then it says in the same breath, back in 1982, and pardon me, if anybody has listened or watched Napoleon Dynamite, you'll understand this is funny. Back in 82, I could throw a pigskin a quarter mile. So that's the first thing that I thought, and I was having a hard time making it real because I kept laughing. But back in 1982, 43% of fathers admitted they'd never changed a diaper. Today, that number is down to about 3%. So here's the scenario. We're spending more time with our kids, and dads are finally changing diapers. Hallelujah. 2 problems that I see with this. Very curious if I'm just being nuts, Scott. But what I'm seeing with this is, number one, we're setting a very low standard. Whoop-de-doo. You're spending time in changing diapers. Anybody can do that. That's not fathering. Number 2 is we're assigning value to traditionally female tasks. Now, should fathers change diapers? Yes. Should fathers clean up around the home? Yes. Should you do more to serve and lead around the house? Yes. I am not saying that the 1950s were the pinnacle. I am saying that we've lost the understanding of fatherhood as masculine. And I don't want someone to call me a good dad because I spend more time, probably on my phone, by the way, with my kids, just because I'm changing diapers. Like, wow, good job, Dad. How many diapers you change a day? That's enough. You know what? And it's like a dad. It's like a dad going, hey, honey, I just changed a diaper. Like, my dad didn't. So that gives me license now to go watch the game for 3 hours in my man cave. Okay, babe, I'm a good dad. Don't worry about it. And so there's 2 issues that I'm seeing, which is a super low standard. And then, like, why are we celebrating that dads are changing diapers? Cool, that's not bad. But why don't we celebrate the fact that fathers lead? Fathers give identity. Fathers affirm their children. Fathers love unconditionally. Fathers set boundaries. Fathers push their children to reach their potential. Fathers challenge. If I read something that was like millennial dads are spending 3 times as much time with their kids as their fathers, and their kids are growing up with a solid identity, learning how to treat women, learning how to lead, sweet. That's a news article that I want to get behind. But this, like, I know it's just an Instagram post, but it made me so frustrated that this is the state of fatherhood today. What do you think? Am I nuts?
No, you're spot on. They're spouting data without the real things that matter, like you said. So, okay. So they're spending more times with their kid. Does that maybe mean that they don't hold a full-time job? Does it maybe mean that they're at home a lot because they can't hold a job? Does it maybe mean that they're so effing lazy that their wife is working and they're not, and they're cool with that? Because I know guys like that. Like, oh, I'm just stay at home. I'm like, what do you do? Does it, and amount of time with kid means nothing, because unless you say amount of time, intentional focus on your kid, because these guys are playing games. They're on their phone. They're tooling around, and it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. It also means, like, there's a lot of people maybe working from home now. There's so many ways you can look at this data. It is not something to be cheering about at all. It's embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing. Like, good for you. You changed a diaper. Yay, yippee. Like, is that how your wife wants you to serve her? If you ask your wife, what could I do today to be a better father and a better husband? Change diapers. She might say that out of irritation, but that's not really what she wants. There's just no way. So I think you are spot on, and I think we have to call it out for what it is. It's stupid.
That's it.
I'm going to keep it just about as low level as possible. It's stupid.
Yeah. I just don't want guys to get sucked in. I don't want dad to see that and be like, oh, well, I guess I am a good dad. I changed a diaper today. And I'm not saying, like, go feel bad about yourself because you're not doing more. I'm saying, let's not let this be the standard that defines what a good dad is. Because that, I mean, look at, it's so hard to get into these bigger topics of, like, society says. But honestly, Look around. Are fathers celebrated? Is masculinity celebrated? Are men celebrated? Are the characteristics of fathers and men and leaders celebrated? The answer is no. And I see this as just being that slight, tiny little piece of the haystack. And you know what? Doesn't really need a whole bunch more conversation.
Oh, I don't know.
But it's just a little bit of piece. It's a little piece of this that just drops on the pile that makes you go like, yeah, I guess it is the same to be a mom and a dad. I guess it is good that I'm like around my kids because I work at home, like you said. I guess it is okay that I'm changing diapers. I'm good. It gives you this false sense of security, and that is so
If that's
dangerous.
what we start to rate being a good dad on, we're in trouble. And it's the same annoyance as people that wear I'm not adulting today, or though.
Oh, don't even start that.
And I think that's actually kind of a millennial thing that's happened. And I look at people and I'm like, do you know how big of an idiot you look like right now? Like, so you're a child. And if you look at a lot of the things going on right now, if you were to talk to Jordan Peterson, he's going to be telling you that almost every issue we are struggling with now with transgender and, gender ideation, these things are based around people being stuck in a hierarchy that they're very low in the hierarchy of personal development and growth. And we're basically saying, hey, look, it's really cool. You change diapers. It's just the dumbing down of society. I don't even know where to go with it. It's so bad.
No, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, these are some of the things that have like hundreds of thousands of likes on them.
Wow.
And I'm going like, man, my content strategy is all wrong. Why am I telling people how to be better dads? I should just tell them they're good for waking up that day.
Exactly.
Anyway, you know what? That was a nice, quick little segment. I got to get that off my chest because I was going to make a reel about it, but it came off a little bit strong for a minute and 30
no
seconds.
real man says anything about changing diapers. A guy does not need to boast or tell anybody the number of diapers he changed today. You are proving nothing. You are missing the point of being a man. So sorry. Yes, let's move on.
No, that is a very good point, and I think that's so countercultural. Guys are probably going to go like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, I thought we were supposed to be the same. I thought parenting was the same. I thought moms and dads were equal. Like, yeah. Equal in value, not equal in what they do. And there are differences. I made a reel on this. This was my most viewed reel that said parenting is not gender neutral. Father's father and mother's mother. And there's very different roles for them. And, you can go watch that if you want. I've never received more hate in my life, which was bizarre. But as soon as you call, things true, I guess people hate you for it. But anyway, maybe we'll dive into that another time. But I'll just keep going with other ideas if you want me to. Are you good? You want me to just keep going? All right. One of the things I noticed the other day is, I don't know, it's like a season right now. Maybe I needed to share this for someone listening. Maybe this is why it happened in my life. I've noticed a lot of little frustrations. And I mean, this is a win, this is a praise item, whatever. I used to get so angry when I was put upon with annoyance. And here's an example. The other day, I've got a few minutes before work. I'm whipping up a real quick breakfast, a few eggs. That's all I had time for. And I had asked my kids, hey, do you want this? Do you want that? Okay, I set them up with breakfast. I'm standing there with my hot plate. And one of my kids is like, actually, Daddy, can I have a smoothie? And I was like, yes. And normally what would have happened, and here's the thing, like you can talk all day about, I could have set a boundary, I could have done this, whatever, that's fine. But in the moment I was like, are you kidding me? And instead I said, yes. And I didn't make a face, I didn't do anything. Another example of this is 2 nights ago. I'm in bed, right? I'm up at 4 a.m. I'm doing my workout. I'm doing 100 burpees. I'm working all day. And then I'm playing with the kids at night. I'm doing stuff around the dinner. I'm helping out. I'm cleaning up. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm busy, just like you guys listening. And so like 9:30 rolls around. I'm finally in bed. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. It's hot. And then my wife is like, oh, is the back door closed? I'm like, I don't know. You usually do that. Is it? She's like, I don't know. I was like, okay. So here's the thing. I could say, that's your job. Why don't you go look? And in that moment, that went through my head. But what came out of my mouth was, I'll go see. And so I got up out of bed, even though I was like, oh, I'm feeling put upon. And I looked. It was not closed. I got to serve my family. And man, this has taken so much work to get to a point where my reaction is, sure, that would be awesome. I'd love to do that. Because there was this thing that just came over me before when I was more childish in this, more immature. I was like, well, what about me? What about my time? I'm in bed. You better go do that because you noticed it. And it was this blame shifting thing that was really the opposite of leadership, which is to take full responsibility. So I don't know. I don't really know what to say about this other than maybe we'll get into like how that came about. But do you ever have things like this? Are you quick to frustration when you're put upon, and have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I naturally just do it. Like last night, I asked my wife, she took the dog for a walk. I was on a podcast really late and we're laying in bed. And I'm like, did you lock the front door? Cause she went out last. Right. And she's like, no. And it was like everything in my soul wanted to say, well, why don't you check? I just got up and did it. And I felt really good about myself. And I think it's really good to talk about these things because I want men to understand that your initial response of selfishness is not unnormal, but what you need to do is just do it right now. Yeah. It's that servant thing. And guys, we're talking to you because you're probably really selfish like we are. And you probably see everything through a lens that like your stuff doesn't stink. And, I'm sitting here thinking about all these things we're talking about, and you and I talk about them because we're so passionate about other guys. We want to see men be better fathers and husbands. Like that's like the paramount for me. I just want to see guys step up. And, we've been studying, we've been students of this for years. And so like, I was just contemplating, do we sound like jerks because we're like going through all these problems? But we've been studying this for years. And our greatest desire, I just want to make sure this is very well understood. Our greatest desire is to see men step up. And if we can help you understand the processes we go through, like our initial response is like, no, I'm busy. You already asked me for X, Y, and Z. I'm not giving you, B. I don't need to start over. I don't need to do that. Like, sure, if it's a pattern, we got to address that pattern, but we are human. But what I'm encouraging everybody to do is start to do the daily little disciplines and start to be intentional so that when you do get put up against the wall with these things, you've prepared and you put yourself in place.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, by the way, of like, oh, is this guy just a jerk? Like, no, I'm operating under the assumption that if you're listening to this podcast, we've already got past the point where you're like, okay, what does Curt want from this? It's for you not to like kill yourself because you hate being a dad so much. Because that was nearly my story. That's literally why I started this. And on the very selfish side of things, on a much more macro selfish side of things, I want to live in a world where your kids are way better than they would have been if you didn't do this work. Because I saw what my behavior was doing to my kids. And if they grew up to be adults like that, this would be a miserable world. I see a lot of dads, not that they mean to, they just don't know how to do the work. And they're raising kids who are going to grow up to live with my kids and eventually be the guys who are like elected into office and start businesses and stuff like that. They're not going to be a very good society if they grow up with, bad dads. So that's why, very personally, I don't want you to experience what I did. Number two, I don't want to live in a world where your kids are raised by a bad dad. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way. But the very simple thing here that I think is like profoundly impactful and almost too simple is just this idea of, dude, if your wife asks you to do something, just man up and do it. Like, stop looking for yours. Think less about you and think more about what is the right thing to do, because that is your role as the man, husband, and father. And you will feel, at least I did, maybe I shouldn't say that. I did, and I'm curious if you did. I have never felt so personally fulfilled as when I do the most for my family, other people. Yep. And that was such a mind F for me. Because I was like, well, how am I going to get mine? What about my personal time? What about my self-care? Bro, you get way more when you don't worry about that and you just do everything for your wife and kids. Is that similar to your story, or am I?
No, it's 100% true, because we are inherently super, super selfish. And we will get it's the whole Zig Ziglar thing, right? Like, now I just lost the saying. I went to Zig Ziglar, I lost the saying, but help people get what they want and you'll get what you want. That is, you're not doing it for a selfish reason, but as soon as you start to kind of do it, you understand the way the world actually really works. This is in business, this is in marriage, this is in parenthood. If you focus on serving others and being a servant and continually just working on yourself, but serving others, everything is going to come full circle and readjust itself in alignment. Now, sure, there's some outliers, there's some crazy stuff that happens, but it's a rule. It's a pillar that you can almost, a principle that you can kind of put a tack in and be like, yes, this is going to happen. And it's incredibly more and more profound in your business or in your marriage as you do it for your wife. And then when you're doing it for your wife, it becomes a lot easier to do it for your kids. And then if you're doing it for your kids, that's what they expect the world is like. So they are going to do it for their spouse and they're going to do it for their kids. And it just makes things so much easier and you will be so much more fulfilled. Bottom line, you'll be so much more fulfilled. If you hate that your wife doesn't do the dishes, like, just make the decision that that's your thing. Like, okay, I hate that she doesn't do dishes, but obviously that doesn't bother her. So I'm going to make time in my day to do the dishes. This shouldn't necessarily be the role I'm going to do, but if it's that important to me, I'm going to do it. And then over time, there's a good chance she's just going to start doing them. But if not, you're going to have found joy and releasing the control over it. And I don't know, there's just so much joy on the other side of trying to control people.
And you know what? That it takes so much faith too. It's at first because you're like, well, if I let go of me, what if I don't get anything back? I'm just
never
wanting to encourage people.
It's never going to end. I'm going to have to do everything around the house. My wife's just going to sit there and watch Oprah and eat popcorn. No. Oh, well, maybe she does. But anyway.
Well, then you got another conversation. That's part of the leadership though, right? Like I talk to guys all the time about, and you know, we probably need more than 8 minutes to touch this topic. But I talk to people all the time about, you know, having those hard conversations and leading their wife in that, because sometimes people don't change unless they're pushed on a little bit with a boundary. And that's okay to do because, yeah, you don't have to sit by if you're doing literally everything. Because I get a lot of guys who come into the program, they're like, dude, I'm already crushing this, and this. Like, how can I be a better husband? I'm like, the thing you need to do is start leading, bro. And that means having hard conversations with your wife that shows expectations and boundaries so that you can both get on the same page, because it should be a partnership. And sometimes one party or the other, it's usually for the guys I work with, the dad isn't stepping up, and that's why we exist. But sometimes the dad is and the mom isn't. So same things, the shoes on the other foot. You can lead her into seeing that lovingly and compassionately while setting expectations and leading by actually being the one who's making decisions and putting the boundaries in your family up. So that's probably a much bigger conversation.
It's a big conversation. And I've been able to see some things through in being married for 27 years and being the age I am. I've been able to see things go the very long route and come full fruition. And it was worth the work, right? Like with your spouse.
What do you mean?
So like I took this, a certification as a coach for what's called story work and working on your own language and how you talk to yourself. And when you elevate yourself, you notice how everybody else isn't. This is coming full circle on our conversation, right? And I was like, babe, you've got to take this course, because I started to recognize her self-talk was horrible, just atrocious. And I could sit there and just pound at it and just like, no, take this. Instead, I just started rephrasing things. And I just started saying, oh, or she would say something like, oh, you probably feel a lot better about yourself if you said X, Y, and Z. And over time, she got to a point, she's like, hey, I want to take that course. And, you know, and then she took the certification and now she's helping other people with that language. So I guess the long game, just like anything discipline wise, where you want to be really fit, you're in it for the long game. You want to be really good at something, you better practice it every single day. And it's the same with your wife. If you want her to grow, then you better be in it for the long game. And you just telling her to do it is probably not the best approach. So there's this gentle art of leadership and guidance, and then allowing for that process to unfold over time.
Yes. Oh, I learned that as well, probably the exact same way. And it was, I think about books, because I was doing a lot of this work out of necessity. I was horrible. Things were horrible. And I was changing. I was like, you have got to read these books. And I think you told a story about this too, right? Like leaving it out. And the same sort of thing. I was like, this is amazing. But what I tried to do was make it exciting in my stories of how I was winning. Mm-hmm. I would be like, did you just see what I did with the kids? Do you see that this took 5 minutes, not 5 hours? here's what I did. It was so awesome. And then I just like left it at the excitement. So there's a lot of ways to go about doing that. Last thing, you said discipline. I just want to touch on this because lately, like I'm feeling it right now, man. I have been extra exhausted. Part of that is my training program is ramping up. The coach is continuing to give me, hill sprints and all these other crazy things. But we've also been doing this 100 burpee a day challenge inside the Brotherhood.
By the way, that's brutal.
It is extremely brutal. So last month, someone's like, hey, do you guys want to do a 100 push-up a day challenge? And of course, we're like, yeah. And that's really easy because you're just down in one position the whole time. Burpees, on the other hand, are whole body movement. 100 of those every morning after a hard workout is really hard. And so anyway, whatever. I'm feeling amazing. It does wonders to my mood to smash those because every day I'm like, cursing the guy who made this challenge inside of our group. And then when I finish, I'm like, dude, I actually love you because I feel so good. So that's neither here nor there. But the point of this is I'm feeling like I have a very taxed nervous system right now. I've noticed that I want to eat worse than usual. I noticed that like I want to not really work or be productive. I want to, grab a piece of nicotine gum, which I haven't done for a long time. I just want to do something to give me that quick burst of like dopamine or relief. And I haven't been. I have not done the things that would make me comfortable in the moment. And what I realized, I hear people talk about discipline and willpower and being a savage all the time. It's very common in our space. And it is very important. For me, it's one of the foundational pillars of who I am. But discipline will always fail if your long-term why is not important enough to you. And I know that people talk about that sometimes, but what we've seen in my life, in our program, we do it like this. Here's your habits. Okay, great. Do the habits. Well, for the first week or two, you're like, this is new and awesome. I'm getting whatever. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks go by. You're like, this is hard. I think I'll take a break. But what happens instead? We get our guys, and I did this, which is why I have the guys do it, to write this thing that I call the Leadership and Legacy Framework. It is a life family vision plan. Who do you want to be at the end of your life? Like it literally starts off, write your own eulogy from your kid's point of view. Who will you want to have been to your children? Take a step back. And we basically build your values, your goals, everything in this so that your habits inform how your life turns out. But the goal you have for your life informs what habits you do. And so when you have a hard time, like me, for example, if I'm just feeling uncomfortable and I'm like, dude, I'm going to go and eat an ice cream sandwich. Like I'm going to drive to go get a box of ice cream sandwiches, probably like 3 of them right now, because that would make me so comfortable. Instead of doing that, I'm faced with this quandary of, number one, I've learned for me, I said before that I was a harsh critic to myself. I've just started being disgusted with my sin. Like, for example, if I did that, I'd be like, dude, I'm revolted by who I would be if I did that. And that's very personal. That's not anybody else. But for me, I'd be revolted with who I was. But the bigger thing is, I said that when I'm 100 years old, I want to be able to squat ass to grass. I want to be fit. I want to be able to hold my great-grandkids. And I want to be hiking and have a long, healthy life for my wife and kids. And so that I live long enough to see it through and be the leader that they need and help to bring up generations. Like my life vision is so big that a little bit of comfort now pales in comparison to the joy and the hope of reward that I have at the end. And that, I mean, I can't remember the scripture, but it talks about that for Christ as well. He endured the most debased punishment and humiliation for the hope of reward that was waiting for him. And so if you are trying to be disciplined, like I had a sales call the other day, he's like, I'm just not disciplined. I'm like, well, why not? Why can't you do the thing? He's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, who do you want to be? What do you want of your life? I don't know. I'm like, well, dude, those are the things we need to work on then. What do you want out of your life? What is bigger for your life than the in-the-moment comfort that's going to last you like 10 seconds? And if you don't have any of those things, it's no wonder you're not disciplined. So anyway, my self-respect is so much more important to me than a little bit of comfort. My long-term vision is so much more important to me than a little bit of comfort. And I think that it's important to talk about this in terms of discipline because I see so many guys go like, man, I couldn't do it. I was disciplined for 2 weeks and I fell off. And these guys talking about discipline, Jocko, they're just different than me, man. So I guess I'll never be able to do it. I don't want you to think that. I want you to get dialed in, and I want you to do the small things every day to build the trust in yourself and your relationship so that you can be a trustworthy man of integrity and lead your family. So what do you think?
Okay, so I'm going to simplify this super
Please.
easy. My wife does this all the time with her nutrition clients. If you are operating through your day and you forget to brush your teeth, are you not going to brush your teeth before bed because you forgot to brush your teeth in the morning or at lunch, whatever you do? And people are like, no, I'm going to brush my teeth. Everything else that's a part of your discipline in your life should be the exact same way. You're going to miss it. You're going to not feel like it. The important thing is to not let that derail you, and also stop saying I'm not disciplined. You like I'm struggling with discipline in this area right now because your language will lead you in the direction that you go. There's just so much research around that. So first of all, I want to also paint a picture of the future. So I'm super disciplined in my exercise. I'm super disciplined in my Bible reading. I'm super disciplined in my prayer and gratitude. I'm super disciplined. I mean, I have like a long list of things I'm disciplined in. Over the last 4 months, I have not been super disciplined in my food, but here's where the difference over time makes a big difference. I was like, man, I must be up 15 pounds. I feel like gross. It's horrible. And so I start eating right, and I go step on the scale. And we're talking about like a 4 or 5 months. Well, I'm up 8 pounds. 8 pounds. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's easy. That's like 2 weeks of effort to get rid of. And the thing that I realize is that the more that you do it, the more you will notice when you don't, and the more exaggerated it'll feel, and the more gross you'll feel, and the sooner you will get back on track. And having that wrapped around your core, I call it being wrapped around my core values. Like it's a value of mine to be able to operate and live long and be very productive and interactive with my family. So I need to be fit. As soon as you start to you latch onto that thing and you're like, wait, that is so much more important to me than my comfort right now in this 118-degree weather and going out and working out. I literally did that this week and it was insane. People told me I was stupid. I might kill myself, but I still did the thing I told myself I was going to do, and I felt amazing afterwards. So I'm just saying, stop doing that language in your head, move into it until it actually is more uncomfortable to not do it than it is to do it.
Yes. And that will lead you to an autopilot that is so high.
But
just FYI.
But then you add on, you're like, oh, well, this is easy now.
Yeah. No, so for me, I continue to keep wanting to grow. But what I mean by autopilot is when things are hard, like you just said, things are stressful, you're moving, you got business, you got this, you got that. When I had Victoria, our fourth, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. And without the need to be super intentional and with a huge amount of added stress, the autopilot Curt, which would have resorted to snippiness and anger and fighting and being a baby, because of the long years now of discipline, it was just like smooth sailing. It's like, bro, okay, I'm not necessarily growing right now. I'm not necessarily giving anyone more than they need, but I am hitting all my marks because it's so natural now. So you got to find the reason why you're going to be disciplined and attach the habits to the vision, but the payoff is immense. And then, like you say, it becomes a lifetime thing. And then I tell guys in the program, this is maybe the last thing, I know we're running out of time here. I tell guys in the program, they're like, well, I'm kind of at this point now where I'm at a plateau, and some of them will stop doing certain things that got them there. And then they fall back. They're like, oh man, I thought, I don't know, maybe I should change it up. I'm like, dude, unless you trust yourself so much that you're like, I could take a day or a week off and get right back on the horse. Unless you trust yourself that much, keep going for like a year. I don't know what the number is, but keep going for a year. And at that point, you'll be able to trust yourself that you'll get back on the horse because you've done it enough, but you won't want to get off the horse because you see by this point that the reason that you're so successful is because of this thing. So the time when you are able to give up the discipline is the time when you decide you will never give it up.
I agree. And then also just get back on the horse. It's so funny when people miss one mark or two, they're like, I'm done. I failed. It's like, well, yeah, you just said it out loud. You did fail. But you could have just said, oh, no, that sucked. It was a little step back. I'm back on the horse. No big deal. So
what's a long
tenacity and and digging in and just doing it.
Yeah. Like the one thing that maybe we'll talk about later is just like long-term perspective. Yeah. I didn't have that for the longest time, and I'm learning this. But when you realize, like, every time someone asks me about 75 hard, I'm like, 75 hard? Hilarious. I'm doing the 75 dad. It lasts 75 years, though, not days. And it's a long-term perspective that we've got to be in. And so, like, what do you mean you're giving up, bro? One day out of like 75 years? Get back on the horse. Because the only other option is you do nothing and you definitely fail.
Yeah.
The other option is you work hard and you might fail, but you probably won't. But the other option is you definitely fail. So anyway, I think this was a lively conversation, Scott. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this again. And I guess, we're at the top.
Yeah, it's a little cathartic. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah. Excellent. Well, hopefully it was more useful than cathartic to the people listening. Otherwise, you can let us know. On Spotify, there's a new Q&A thing at the bottom that says, let me know what you think. And I'll be posting this on YouTube. This will be one of the first ones that come out on YouTube. I just posted my first YouTube video, getting the subscribers on there. So I've always wanted to say this, smash the like button and subscribe.
Smash it.
For real this time, because I got something to smash and like. I'll put out the show notes, links to Scott, Dad.Work/podcast. Anywhere you want to send them, you got a VA business, you set people up with
Media Machine,
and Brotherhood of Fatherhood.
Media Machine virtual assistants. Just follow me on Scott Rammage on Facebook and Instagram. You can reach out to me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Be a man. Just man up and do the hard thing. We'll talk soon.